Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, first part thereof. No, it's not, it's the third now for the 17th of December 2025. And goodness me, that means Merry Christmas to you all. We're at that point where we are striking distance away from the big day in our holidays, if that's your thing. What are we going to talk about today? My goodness, right. Predominantly the huge numbers that the Ukrainians have posted with regard to Russian losses over the last 24 hours. And that's something we've seen over the last week. I think the Ukrainians are really having a purple patch in terms of destruction of personnel and material. So we're going to talk about that, whether the submarine was damaged or not. We're going to look at lots of footage. And yeah, that's pretty much it, give or take. I mean, there's just a lot of footage to go through, which I think itself is a statement. Okay, if you haven't done so already, please like, subscribe, and share. If you're going to subscribe, click the bell icon and click all rather than personalize, and you'll be kept in the loop with regard to everything that's been going on the front lines. Let's get into the long weeds of it. Okay, so here we have the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, and this is a number we have not seen for a very long time. Not only have we had in the last week a day of over 1,400, and then another day, it was 2 days of over 1,400, day of 1,300, and then yesterday I think it's 1,150 after going back down below 100. We even had a 700 and something on one day, so it's like really up and down. But actually over the last 7 days we've had 4 days of really good personnel numbers for the Ukrainian point from the Ukrainian point of view, and then to see 1,730 posted, that's just incredible what has been going on. And then can we see this reflected in other statistics? So the first one I always go to see whether the personnel losses are as a result of activities taking place on the front line and whether they are confirmed by other data points. We have 179 vehicles and fuel tanks, which means I think the Russians have been attacking rather than these being large troop accumulations that have been struck, although I think that is happening too. And then we have 21 armored combat vehicles. We haven't seen that over 20 for bloody ages, right? So the Russians have been attacking. That's what this tells me. 6 tanks as well is not insignificant. 33 artillery systems, that's a good haul as well. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 1 air defense system, and 1 piece of special equipment. So as far as the stats are concerned, the Russians have lost an absolute ton of stuff and personnel over the last 24 hours. And when we go to the unmanned systems forces, the SBS as they're known as in their own language, USF unmanned systems forces, we have over the last 24 hours, so not today, we can look at today, and already today we have 256 enemy personnel have been rendered casualties, 141 killed, 115 wounded, and we are at 11:40 UK time, so it's going to be 1:40 Ukrainian time. Those numbers are racking up every single day so quickly. But over the previous day, we have 507 enemy personnel lost, which I think is a really high number. Is that not the record or one of the records? And 1,075 damaged targets, just huge numbers of pieces of kit. We have, if we go down to APCs, there are 9 APCs that are taken out from these guys alone, 6 tanks. So the 6 tanks on the list appear to have come from the USF, entirely, the unmanned systems forces. Remember, you've got this as a separate core of drone operators, but you've also got drone units within other brigades and battalions as well. So don't think that every bit of drone footage you see comes from these guys. That's definitely not the case. Okay, and then 34 motorcycles and buggies, 32 light, heavy, and special purpose vehicles. Add those together, you get 66, just in case you can't do your maths, and that is well away from 179. And so there's been a lot of other units operating and taking out kit. I mean, these numbers from both these sources are very, very good for the Ukrainians yesterday. Now, the flip side of when you have very good numbers for Ukraine, generally it means that the Russians have been attacking a lot. And that means that the Ukrainians are under heaps of pressure. So although they are attriting the Russians at insanely good rates, it is going to be the case that the Ukrainians are under huge amounts of pressure on the front line. So bear that in mind. Then just on personnel, so the personnel side of things, we had The Ukrainian president yesterday in the Dutch parliament saying Russia loses 30,000 soldiers every month, killed every month, but tracks every dollar and every euro. Zelenskyy tells the Dutch parliament Russians don't count their dead, the Ukrainian president said, calling for frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine's defense. I think he said something along the lines of, in this bit of speech, I think he said something along the lines of, we've got video evidence for all of these. So he isn't just pulling these numbers out of his posterior, is the claim here. But I mean, that's a staggering number of killed every month. Now, he could be trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, trying to make things look as positive as possible for the Ukrainians. But, looking at the numbers recently, they've been hellish for the Russians. And we can look at other data points as well. So here's another one. This is the I Want to Live project, which is where they get these phone calls. There's a call center that the Ukrainians have where they get these calls from all sorts, actually, but Russian fighters. I say all sorts because I think calls go to them for like Ukrainians within the occupied territories trying to give geolocations of pieces of equipment and stuff like that. I'm sure that's what I saw on that BBC documentary once. But anyway, the I Want to Live project takes these calls from, or communications from, Russians who are fighting, who want to surrender. And I think even probably not the majority, if they do successfully surrender, the majority don't go just across the contact line to surrender, because that would be really dangerous. A lot of them kind of do a runner, and then there are these routes that go through places like Georgia and elsewhere to get them out of Dodge into safety so they can not partake in the war any longer. So the I Want to Live project reports on losses in Russia's 810th. So if you remember the 810th, they've been mauled a number of times. They were in Krinky, and they got absolutely mauled there. Then they went up to Kursk, and then initially they did okay, and then they got mauled up there. And here we have the I Want to Live project saying the losses on Russia's 810th Guards Naval Infantry Brigade, so crack troops supposedly, but like I've said to you many times, when they get reconstituted that many times, they aren't cracked. So they used to take, in kind of peacetime, if you like, they would take the cream of each already trained unit's troops. So they'd say, right, we go to this unit of bog standard infantry, and we're going to say, right, we're going to take these 10 people from you, and then go to another one. We're going to take those 10 people from you. They're already trained up, but they're the best of the bunch. And then they take them into the naval infantry brigades, into the Marines or the VDV, the airborne, paratroopers, whatever. And they make them even better, turn them into elite troops. And so when they started the war, they had all these elite troops, and then it got completely obliterated or attrited over time. Either way, they lose that capacity and capability, and then they have to replace them. But it gets so desperate, you can't go around these different units and taking the best of the troops, because they're all fighting on the front lines and they're all screwed anyway. And there's no way of kind of knowing who the best units are, because they're not in like training grounds, and you don't speak to commanders and say, well, you can take him, and him. No, it's just mental. And so they basically get newbies in and get these green recruits in, and then they're having to start from scratch. So they aren't the elites that they used to be. That said, the 810th has been absolutely mauled, each time with the same result when they've been to redeploy from Kherson to Kursk. Massive senseless losses and abuse by commanders. All Translated says in 2022 alone, beginning of the war, the brigade lost nearly 85% of its personnel. Whew. In 2024, it was thrown. I mean, generally, you become combat ineffective when you've lost 30%. Let alone 85%. In 2024, it was thrown into meat assaults in the Kursk region. Most of the 2014 most of the identified 2014 dead come from this period. So 2024 was a bad year for them. Families filed 1,708 missing person requests last year. According to the project, these losses occurred under Commander Oleg Vlasov, promoted to general and awarded Hero of Russia by Putin. Soldiers were sent into assaults through minefields, sometimes wounded or on crutches. The published list remains incomplete. So you just another data point there. Then we have this SBS operators, so the unmanned systems forces, destroy the enemy in the Kupiansk direction, operating up there, the 429th Separate Regiment Achilles. They must be part of the SBS. Hit more than 1,800 enemy personnel, of which more than 1,000 were eliminated. So just in Kupiansk area alone, when these guys were called into action to save kind of Kupiansk, These guys have killed 1,000 Russians there with drones and taken 1,800 casualties as a whole. Absolutely insane. Right, talking about troop deaths. This was originally, well, Pierre sent this to me actually saying, goodness me, this looks like a huge bomb. And I sent one back saying, mate, to be honest, the French are testing out their new AASM 1000, which would be a 1,000 kilogram bomb, rather than the AASM 250, which is the guided glide bomb that the Ukrainians generally use. So it'd be like 4 times as big a blast. But here, I mean, it looked like a huge explosion. It turns out, and this is Ukrainian forces blew up the school building in Novorossiysk in Dnipropetrovsk. Well, it turns out that this might have been mined, right? So, and that makes much more sense of this. So, why I'm including this here, this appears to be an accumulation of troops. Ukrainian military remotely detonated a mined building occupied by the Russian infantry group. And this Russian infantry group, assuming that they are holed up in this building, if you're counting up casualties, then I assume you're going to include a number from here, if indeed you've counted them into there using intel. I mean, that building's no more. Well, that is an absolutely insane explosion. And there's no way that was a bomb. I think it makes more sense that was indeed a case of mining that building, knowing. I mean, this happened in Bakhmut to some degree. I think as they were withdrawing, they were trying to mine certain buildings because they knew the Russians would take over. Or here you've got a building. I guess that the Ukrainians would have thought would have been a prime building for the Russians to take on as a place to billet their troops. It often happens with schools, and so yeah, that could be, say, a school. They have all these different rooms that you can use as dormitories effectively, and then you mine that when they're least expecting it, let it go, and bosh, that's huge. And then I've already showed you this video. I showed this to you yesterday, I think, but I was talking about how FP2 drones are being used much more on the front lines. I just wanted to, in light of what we're just saying, like, it's not just fighting on the front line, although I think that's been incredibly attritional for the Russians, as we'll see in a short while. But they're also using drones in the near rear, and this, for example, is in Pokrovsk, or at least some of this was in Blahadatne and positions. That's a drone launcher crew in Blahadatne and a targeted Russian troop position near Pokrovsk. In other words, they are using these near rear sizable enough drones to destroy troop accumulations, and that could be also why the Russians are the Ukrainians are posting huge Russian losses this week. Now, Chris Owicki has one of his threads we're going to go through. How does a false report that, say, Kupiansk has been captured by Russia come to be delivered on camera to Vladimir Putin? A Russian war blogger blames a military reporting process that prizes low-value metrics, rewards blind optimism, and eliminates nuance. Okay, so context. The Russians, and this has happened with the Ukrainians on occasion, but this is an endemic issue with the Russians, where a commander reports that they've taken this village because that's what's been expected of them. Said, yeah, okay, we're taking this village, bish bash bosh, and they haven't taken that village, but he wants like a medal or congratulations or whatever. And then the commander goes, well, now you've taken that village, you need to go and do this or do that or go on to the next place. And you're like, oh my God, but I haven't actually taken that village. So then you have to rush through taking that village. And then because it's a rush job and you're not using proper tactics and whatnot, you end up making an absolute meal of it, a pig's ear of it, and you become attrited at a far greater level than had you actually done a sensible job of attacking in the first place. And this then also happens with large settlements like Kupiansk, which is, oh yeah, we're in control of 50% of Kupiansk or 70% of Kupiansk or whatever. And then you get Putin and Gerasimov announcing this on television and saying, look, we're gonna have a ceasefire for 6 hours in Pokrovsk and Kupiansk so that you can bring in journalists and we can prove to you that we control Kupiansk. Meanwhile, the Russians in the area are going, holy crapola, we don't control Kupiansk. What the hell is going on? So how does this happen? How do you get to a point where Putin's announcing it on TV or someone's announcing it to him? So Zinovsky, a Russian war blogger, writes the transfer of operational information from the bottom up in the Russian Ministry of Defense and the Russian Armed Forces is accompanied by a consistent transformation of the initial data as it moves up the chain of command. This process is not a system, but an established practice and is based on stable semantic and organizational mechanisms. At the level of a motorized rifle airborne assault platoon, initial observations are recorded in formulations that imply the completion of the action. Expressions like reporting the occupation of positions in their meaning denote the establishment of control, although in fact they can only reflect either the fact of a short-term presence or simply that the report was sent on time. Now, you'll find this with mappers like Suryat Maps, a pro-Russian mapper that will just take on what is said or look at geolocations and say, look, we've got a Russian presence in this place, therefore they control it. And then if you're going on these maps, oh, we control this village, well, let's move on to the next one. No, we don't control that village. There was a video of some guy with a flag in the middle of it, but it turns out that 20 minutes later he was shot and the flag was blown up. You know, that's not control type thing. And so this is what your man here is saying. Expressions like, quote, reporting the occupation of positions in their meaning denote that that it can either be a short-term presence or the report was just sent on time. So visual markers, planting a flag, putting a pointer on operational maps, tactical geo-referencing via GLONASS or GPS act as indices of the commander's personal success, reinforcing the significance of the report without any indication of the stability of control. At the company and battalion levels, reports are aggregated and subject to semantic smoothing. Direct descriptions of uncertainty are replaced with euphemisms like clearance completed or forward progress. I guess you could liken this to, you know, when you pass a story down a line and you say, well, how big was the fish? The fish was this big. You never, whenever you tell the story or retell the story over and over, it never gets smaller. No one ever goes, oh yeah, no, it only ever gets bigger until before you know it, you've caught a whale. So there's kind of one way skewing there. But anyway, these formulas shift the emphasis of the actual tactical situation to the illusion of the unit's effectiveness in combat and order execution. Silence regarding enemy proximity or instability helps maintain the impression of consistent combat mission execution for superiors. At the regimental and brigade levels, information is presented in the form of summaries, where the verbal construction of reports and dispatches is complemented by striking visual elements, maps, color charts, videos, and presentations. Terms like liberation of a populated area expand their meaning through associations with strategic success, even with only fragmentary control of territory on the front lines. The absence of references to no man's land maintains unambiguous interpretation for higher command. Further consolidation of data at the divisional and army headquarters, formulas like control established along the line integrate disparate information into a unified operational picture. The use of metrics, areas, numbers, lengths, or the now fashionable number of buildings strengthens the credibility of reports, masking the variability of the situation and emphasizing compliance with planned indicators. At the level of troop groups and the general staff, reports are finally standardized. For reports to the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, i.e. Putin, absolute constructs are used. Complete liberation. Mission accomplished. These formulas act like incantations, shaping a desired picture of the theatre of operations and displacing the actual dynamics of combat operations beyond the official narrative. Events in the Kupiansk region clearly demonstrate this mechanism. Previous declarations of the city's liberation, based on reports from above, clashed with the situation on the ground, where the Ukrainian armed forces partially regained their positions in several neighborhoods of the city and adjacent villages. The discrepancy between the term liberation and the actual situation reveals how, within hierarchical military information channels, the substitution of meanings influences strategic decisions. Garbage in, garbage out. As a result, the establishment practice ensures formal control over troops and disciplinary integrity in the execution of simulated orders, but at the same time, quite logically produces simulated distortions that require subsequent correction on the battlefield. And of course, that correction often means that they have to do things in a rushed way that is less efficient. The need to go and sacrifice soldiers to recapture positions that have already been published at the top as a success. This increases the command's dependence on verification of the content of victory reports from below and highlights the structural vulnerability of the hierarchical military narrative, even in the context of a sluggish positional war. Okay, so that's an explanation of how you get to a position of huge disinformation. Right. First of all, yes, I mean, now we're going to see an absolute bunch of video footage. And there's plenty more. I've just selected a few. This is just a small excerpt out of a claim concerning a column of S-400s launchers in the Belgorod region. Now, the only thing I will say to this, like I'm always looking at the foliage, and when I look at this, I'm thinking, does that look like wintertime? I mean, we are definitely in winter at the moment, and that looks like it's just been sort of mown. There's foliage on the trees there. I don't know. So I would cast some skepticism on that, although the whole thing could just be from some time back. Okay, so at first the Russians driving a column of vehicles, looking impressive and filming everything. So this is them filming themselves driving this big column of vehicles, including S-400 launchers. I mean, this is a considerable bunch of kit. Then a few days later, a Russian war correspondent whines that the very same column has been destroyed, a kind of cycle of Russian equipment. Well, no worries, there are always horses. So on the 14th of December, around 4:30, a strike was carried out on a column of an S-400 anti-aircraft missile system. So the claim is, and this is from a Russian, that this S-400 column was hit on the 14th of December. So maybe these are evergreen trees, I don't know. In the Belgorod region, in the area of the village of Ravka, the strike was carried out using 6 strike drones. As a result of the strike, a launcher unit of the type 5P85SM201 was damaged. Sorry, was destroyed, and one such one was damaged. 4 anti-aircraft guided missiles, 48 N6DM guided missiles, were destroyed as well. So 2 launchers, 1 destroyed, 1 damaged, and 4 missiles taken out in this column of equipment that they were kind of shouting about. So that has happened, and that's obviously a really good haul for the Ukrainians, taking out air defense capabilities in the area. Then there's this. I mean, I could have put this in the personnel section. Massacre of Russian infantry and equipment by drone operators of the Phoenix group. Among other things, the operators recorded a case when a Bukanka towed a North Korean multiple launch rocket system, which we see. Just trying to find where that is. Yeah, here it is. I think this is the one. I'm going to have to turn the music off. OBS. No, that's motorcycle quad. Oh, I thought it was. Oh, here it is. So that Bukanka is. I mean, interesting that Bukanka carries this multiple launch rocket system. Now, just to let you know that there are these types of multiple. I mean, they don't look anything compared to, say, the Smerch, BN-21 Grad or whatever, or the BN-27 Uragan. I mean, these are just very cheap and cheerful towed Korean multiple launch rocket systems that the Russians have been using. But towed by Bukanka there, I mean, pretty incredible. Anyway, this is yet another montage of footage showing just stupendous amounts of people and stuff getting taken out. So again, it kind of feeds into what we're seeing from the stats over the last 24 hours plus the last week, really. Then we have an absolutely staggering bit of footage. Ukrainian strikes catch a Russian column in the open on a road, causing the total obliteration of it. It's near Shakova, Dobropilya sector on Donetsk front. I know that Andrew Perpetua got involved with someone. Essentially, I got involved in the argument. The idea that the Ukrainians have cleared the top of Kupiansk, the north of Kupiansk, and cut off and encircled these troops, and there are some pockets still left in Kupiansk. But then history legends, this pro-Russian video channel like mine, but does it from a more pro-Russian point of view. Quite a big player, or certainly was earlier on in the war. And someone was there saying, well, look, you know, there's a geolocation of someone walking the streets of Kupiansk, a Russian soldier, on this day, announcing what day it is. I mean, this just shows that it's absolute nonsense and deep state maps are lying. It's like, you just geolocated someone walking in the streets of southern Kupiansk right next to where deep state map says the Russians have control. And you say that disproves everywhere north of Kupiansk being retaken by the Ukrainians. I mean, that's like me saying it's not raining in Paris right now because it's not raining here. No. So anyway, history legends on that video that was being referenced talked about the Russians getting shellacked themselves, actually admitting they got hit near Shakova, and this must be it. This is quite an incredible bit of footage where you've got some side-by-side footage of this as well. Is it this one or a later one? It might be a later. I've got so much footage where you have the recording of it in daylight, but although it's very snowy and very grey and yeah, but then you have side by side imagery looking at the destruction from a thermal imaging point of view as well. So if we look here, you've got a whole bunch of equipment and then a whole bunch of troops. And then to me, it looks like for the first time in a long time, you've got artillery coming in and taking a shot at this stuff. And here you go. So you've got, you know, that's what it looks like on the right from the drone's visual camera point of view. And then we've got these strikes taking place, and you can almost not see them at all. But actually, there are these. I don't know. Is that coming in fairly laterally there? If we go back, yeah. Wow, is that what you'd expect for artillery? Is that a missile? But it's still coming very, very low. Wow. I missed that when I was watching this previously. Oh, well. Yeah, let me know what you think. But yeah, you've got something coming in there, pretty hot and very low trajectory, and then an awful lot of equipment getting taken out and then getting continually taken out. I don't think this is by drones personally. So I think that that's a much steeper one. And yeah, I mean, I presume that's artillery rather than a Gimlers or something. I mean, we know from artillery that you can have the simultaneous striking capacities where you fire at different trajectories, and that will mean that, so if you fire something up and then down, it's going to take much longer to get from A to B because it has to go all the way up and then come all the way down. And if you can use that trajectory to fire from A to B and still get there, then it will get there quicker. So what you can do is you can fire one like that, then one like that, and then one like that. So you get the time difference, as in I'm firing one, then have to wait 3 seconds, fire two, wait 3 seconds, fire three. And that 3 seconds, 3 seconds, 3 seconds. So 6 seconds from this one to the one with that trajectory means that you can time it so that all three hit at the same time. Point being that you are going to get artillery that is flying in not on that parabolic trajectory, right? Anyway, you just got an awful lot of kit being blown up here and an awful lot of people getting taken out and so much footage coming out. So then when I go back to here and I say, oh, look, we've got a day of 1,730 personnel lost, 179 vehicles and fuel tanks, one piece of special equipment, a piece of air defense, piece of multiple launch rocket system. And then we got 21 APCs and IFVs and 6 tanks. I'm like, right, do I believe that? And then on the same day, we've just got an absolute ton of equipment being blown up and caught on camera being blown up and all these different claims. And you've got a whole ton of personnel being taken out by drones. You've got, yeah, all sorts of footage, you know, hitting the socials. And that's what you would expect. So if you have a day of a lot of kit getting blown up, you would also more likely have a day where you have a lot more footage coming out, and we have a day where a lot more footage is coming out. Russians use fog and low visibility to attack the area of responsibility of the Azov. They deployed 16 quad bikes, the Russians, with infantry. The assault group was destroyed before contact. And this is not the first time we've seen this, where the Russians don't even get to where they're trying to get to fight with the Ukrainians, that they're entirely destroyed en route. Drone units, artillery, and pre-laid mines were used. So actually, there were drones, there was artillery, as mentioned, and then pre-laid mines as well. used too. So yeah, again, this is how Null Report sees that video. Another Russian winter walk ends early near Dobropilya. Using fog for cover, Russian troops launched a motorized infantry assault with 16 quad bikes in the sector held by Ukraine's First Corps Azov. None reached their target. A combo of mines, drones, and artillery crushed them on approach. And then then there's more. Here's another video of additional footage of the destruction of Russian armored column as seen by drone operators from the 42nd Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. So this is a different brigade somewhere else taking out more equipment. And here we've got another column, except this is not quad bikes. These are tanks and AFVs and whatnot. And here you can see them getting picked off one by one. There was another side-by-side bit of footage I saw as well that wasn't the one that I've just shown you, where there was a curve in the road and there were some buildings too. Anyway, and then the infantry from these tried to dismount and get out of dodge. And what was that from this one? That's another one. I've seen so many over the last couple of days. Like I say, here you got lots of equipment getting taken out, but also lots of personnel too. Absolutely terrible day for the Russians. Here, Ukrainian forces destroyed a Russian forward position in eastern Hrishnya in Pokrovsk axis. Russian troops continue probing towards that village in small groups from Pokrovsk, but remain under constant fire. The area is actively defended by the 82nd Air Assault Brigade. So you've got more personnel being taken out, more destruction of Russians there. You can go and watch all of these at your own leisure. As they're all linked in the description below. Now, more worryingly, the 31st Brigade of the claims that in the area of Zaporizhzhia in the south, the enemy, the Russians, have begun launching analogs of Ukrainian vampires. I was wondering how long this was going to take for the Russians to get their Baba Yaga drones used and to try and get parity with the Ukrainians, who have had this advantage over the Russians for really a considerable time in these larger octocopters or hexacopters. And one such drone has been shot down by soldiers, it says here, and that's what this video shows. So an FPV interceptor drone comes along and takes out that larger Russian Baba Yaga and sends it toppling down to the ground below. Okay, here is what the Russians, this is what freedom looks like in Russia. This is their idea of liberation, using bombs capable of destroying not just individual buildings but entire residential neighborhoods. This is Konstantinivka. Really sad scenes from there as you see destruction of entire buildings, huge areas of rubblized destruction. It's so sad. And then we have a few bits of news of people who have fallen out windows or similar. In Russia, Radomir Kurtić, a representative of the Serbian defense company Yugo Import SDPR, died, quote, under suspicious circumstances. Kurtić was in Moscow for the second time as a representative of Yugo Import SDPR. So whether this was a Serbian trying to do business with the Russians and dying because Ukrainians have taken him out, I don't know, or whether there was some reason the Russians wanted to take him out. A company commission visited the office in Moscow and discovered that a large number of documents and computer hard drives were missing. Russian investigative authorities provided no official information about what happened to the embassy, to Yugo Import SDPR representatives in Moscow, or to Serbia's security services. So that then starts looking more like it's the Russians what did it, but who knows? Then we have Ukrainian forces eliminating Mikhailo Mishin, the former Minister of Sports in the Donetsk People's Republic near Pokrovsk. Now, I presume, well, I don't know, actually. I have no idea whether this was an assassination, a car bomb, a missile that hit the building he lived in the Pokrovsk area. Mishin had served in the so-called DNR government since 2014. So he has died. Okay, we're moving on to, more equipment, but we're going to talk about the sub that was hit by the underwater kamikaze drone. This is the Kilo class submarine, and the GIF that shows that the submarine's over here, and you can see that white bit. If that white bit is the bit of the submarine that's still above the water, Then below, you're going to get the fin. We're going to the tail that we're going to look at in a second, and then you've got this explosion here. So it doesn't look like it was a direct hit, but the question is, did it still cause a significant enough damage still to the submarine so that you can call it a casualty of war? Now, the Russians then released a video to try and say, hey, nothing to see here. Everything's all right. Thank you very much. Note that the video starts by looking at the submarine without looking at the aft of the sub. Oops, let's go back there. Yeah, so you don't see the very stern of the ship, of the submarine. However, we also don't have a timestamp on this. This could have been the submarine in all its glory. And again, you just want to see it left there slightly. But this could have been taken months ago anyway. So uh, I don't know that this tells us anything. So no report says Russia claims that the Kilo submarine is undamaged after Ukraine's drone strike, yet the footage avoids showing the stern and offers no timestamp. If everything's fine, why hide the impact zone? I just personally, I just think that looks like a very nicely painted sub from some time back. But who knows? Um, what we do know is that the sub hasn't moved, and yet apparently other ships and stuff have in the area. Um, I I don't know. I mean, there's one ship has definitely moved from there, but there are claims that other ships and possibly another submarine has moved, or two submarines have moved from there, but this one hasn't. A Planet satellite image of Novorossiysk taken today shows the aftermath of the Ukrainian underwater drone attack on the Russian Kilo class submarine. Still hard to conduct a precise battle damage assessment, but at least we can see the explosion occurred approximately 20 meters from the vessel. Just in case says the sub hasn't moved, which in my opinion is a big sign it was damaged. I mean, the best proof of it not being damaged is to say, look, we can move it. We've moved it. There you go. Now, Vantor satellite imagery confirms the aftermath of Ukraine's underwater drone strike on the submarine. Imagery shows the explosion occurred near the stern and caused visible damage to the pier, with the targeted sub still moored. Now, in this image, you can see explosion around there, and that's it sticking out of the water. That's basically the very edge of what you saw in that video, assuming that video, is timestamped to yesterday, then it's filming it there. But what the question is, what's underwater here, and will that have been damaged by this effectively what is a kind of a near miss? Intel Schizo has a pretty good analysis here, so we'll look through that one. Don't know why it's not rendering right. They've moved the two other subs that were docked in this area and have left the one that was targeted, indicating that this particular sub is likely damaged. If you moved the other two, why haven't you moved this one, the one that everyone's worried about? It's likely damaged and unable to be moved at this time. You can see a large crater on the pier in the satellite imagery below, and the stern of the Kilo extends about 8 meters underwater, which is visible on Google Earth, and fits dead center of the crater. So that's the key point. So this, in my opinion, this image is all you need to know that the submarine was definitely put out of action, almost certainly. So if you look at this image here, that is exactly where the underwater drone hit. So if we go back to the image, that is where it hit. Pretty much the corner, but yeah, as according to the image that we were just looking at, the fin, or the whatever you call it, the very after of the submarine goes straight into the middle of that yellow circle. And I'm not trying to be as positive as possible. This image, like if it exploded here, that's taken out the steering capabilities and the propulsion of that submarine. There's no doubt about that in my book. So you can see a large crater on the pier and the satellite imagery below, and the stern of the Kilo extends about 8 meters underwater, visible on Google Earth, and it's dead center of the crater. Image 3, I highlighted the area of the crater and the above water length of the Kilo, and you can see just even the above water portion extends several meters within the blast radius of the underwater portion. And the underwater portion extends even further and pretty much lands dead center of the blast radius. So yeah, even the above water bit there is within that sort of damage radius. Here, Status 6 had said as well to note the stern section of Kilo class submarine. Just in general, this is a different image of a different Kilo class submarine, or the same one in a different place, remains submerged. So presumably it was even closer than 20 meters. Highly probable that at least the propeller and got affected in a kinetic way. Satellite imagery I've used is not recent and used for illustration purposes only. And you get an even better sense of how much further the sub goes back. So this is where the water, all this green area is where it is usually underwater. So you've got a huge area that's underwater here. So we go back to that first video or the claim here. You got a huge area that isn't being shown to the left of the submarine there. It's just not being shown. Okay, so back to Intel Schizo. And I think we just come out of that. Yeah, so he shows these other sources and says another great image highlighting the aft end of the sub, where you get to see just how long it is, as well as very likely this portion being heavily damaged, is well within that blast radius. So I am fairly confident that that submarine was in a spot of bother. Now, some other people have said some interesting statements as well and observations. We have footage, but not of the stern. Best case scenario, still unconfirmed. Important to remember, there is damage to the screw, shaft, and rudders, but that's all repairable. There are floating docks in Novorossiysk, so it may well be fixed. Other images show the sub down at the stern. I could give the devil the benefit of the doubt and say the sub hasn't moved because they're doing underwater inspections, which is easier at the berth, but that implies competence. And then there's this. So again, I can't speak to the provenance of this claim and who this person is, but being reflecting on what happened underwater, the detonation in the corner may have quite an influence on the outcome. Whether the submarine moved along the pier was shifted by the explosion is unknown to me, though it is highly likely that some displacement occurred laterally along the pier. So as it exploded, it's going to push the sub further along, so it looks like it's actually further away from the explosion than it was. If you remember the video itself, the conning tower was actually quite close to, I thought it was rather close to the corner there, and so it might have been pushed to as far as this picture goes, to the top right along the jetty by the kinetic sort of explosion, and that can make you think it was even further away than it initially was. But anyway, underwater, the gas bubble was constrained by 3 of 6 directions, the pier walls on 2 sides and the seabed below. Being off by a few meters reduces the shock effect. The plume of the footage appeared very high. I estimate at its peak it was 80 meters, which was almost certainly influenced by the corner. A shallow explosion produces a larger gas bubble than a deeper one. While it may not have fully enveloped the stern, it is likely to have at least rocked the vessel, maybe damaged the moorings. Local water velocities could well have exceeded 20 meters a second, creating significant shearing forces. Depending on the seabed composition, it is likely that more than sand was displaced, with stones acting as abrasive projectiles. The brownish hue visible in parts of the plume is not the pier falling apart, but material pressed up along the walls from the seabed. So basically, you're going to get not spalling so much, you're just going to get shrapnel absolutely flying into the submarine from below. The released footage makes it impossible to see any aftermath at the stern, but it's uncertain to me as a layperson whether it was even the correct submarine shown by the vandals. Even if submarines are designed to withstand high static pressures and gradual changes in pressure, dynamic surges are an entirely different animal. It is also very likely that the corner location had a substantial influence on how the forces played out. Next time I go swimming, I will take 2 or 3 plunges near a corner and have someone else watch how the water comes racing up the walls. This is what I am referring to with the modulation due to the location and geometry of the space in the close vicinity of the blast, he says, showing some pictures. Red straight up the wall, yellow and purple modulated later and expand from point of detonation away, possibly split by stern propulsion system. Orange heavily modulated, combination of red after the blast hit the wall to the left of the image, he says. So anyway, and this is the conning tower there, by the way. So that's what I was talking about. Look, there's a conning tower. That is very, very close to the submarine. So I reckon that submarine is in a lot of trouble. Right, so on to distance strikes. Spent too long on that. My goodness, it's already really long. Very quiet night for the Ukrainians, thankfully. 69 drones sent into Ukraine, 37 were intercepted, no missiles. Southern, northern, and eastern regions, but not too many drones, so that's good. Russian Defense Minister Bulatov says Kupiansk is under the control of the Russian armed forces, so still claiming that Kupiansk is under Russian control. More than 70% of thermal power plants and over 37% of hydroelectric power plants in Ukraine have been put out of operation. So that's what the Russians are claiming. I do think that the Ukrainians are in a lot of energy problem. In the last half an hour, said Tim White about an hour ago, Zaporizhzhia was hit what looks like multiple aerial bombs. One has hit a tower block in the city. Casualty numbers not yet known. All alerts were in place, so hopefully minimal. And you can see some pretty horrible destruction to these apartment blocks. 3 strikes on Zaporizhzhia, both in the city and the wider district. Drones and aerial bombs have been used in the attack in the city. 2 apartment blocks have been hit, and there are fears people are trapped in the rubble. So it looks pretty horrific there in Zaporizhzhia. In Donetsk, 4 firefighters have been injured when their truck was hit, not by another lorry, it's corrected later by a drone. It happened in Druskivka when they were on their way to tackle Russian strikes on a tough night for the residents in the divided region. Odessa was also attacked twice this morning with damage to civilian infrastructure. As with Zaporizhzhia, aerial bombs and drones were both used. Aerial bombs as well. Transport was targeted, but no injuries are reported. 1 incoming item was shot down over the sea there. So that's what Tim White had to say. And then as far as what the Ukrainians achieved, not too much information coming out so far. A lot of drones sent over Crimea, but I think more towards Krasnodar. So we know that one place, particularly in Krasnodar, was targeted. Then you've got Saratov, Engels. I also have that. I've got a baby knocking on the door behind me, that, if you can hear that noise. And then Rostov-on-Don was targeted too. So now we're going to go into a bit more of the detail there. One of the more significant images here comes from Kemerovo, having a very special night. The PJSC Cox, the largest coke chemical plant producer of rare metallurgical coke for blast furnaces, has suddenly decided to self-combust. I actually don't know where this is, and I haven't seen this anywhere else. So take that with a pinch of salt, but that came out last night from a source I don't usually rely on. But yeah, that looks pretty good to me. Then Slavyansk on Kuban, so this is in the Krasnodar region. There were definitely some strikes taking place there. Indeed, last night, Ukrainian drones hit an oil refinery there in Slavyansk na Kubani, southern Russia, 380 kilometers from the front line. A fire was reported. The refinery takes 5.2 million tons a year, has been struck repeatedly since Russia's full-scale invasion, disrupting operations there. And indeed, deep strike forces hit, says no reports this morning, Slavyansk na Kubani oil refinery, causing explosions of fire fuel tank, and a vessel at Rostov's Nikolaevskaya depot were also hit. In occupied Luhansk, a Russian 101st Brigade depot was struck. Earlier, a drone strike halted 14 gas wells in the Caspian Sea, so Caspian Sea as well. So quite a lot of damage being done, but we don't have too much video evidence of that. Oil refinery in Saratov region was also attacked last night. It had previously been subjected to similar attacks on the 13th. Residents reported hearing at least 10 Powerful explosions, both in Saratov itself and the neighboring city of Engels. So it could be some useful damage done there. And we have an explosion caught in an image here, strike on an industrial site in occupied Donetsk. Preliminary reports indicated that the Petrovsky coal machinery plant was hit. Russian forces routinely use occupied factories for military production, equipment, repairs, ammunition storage, and housing soldiers. So some more destruction there in occupied territories. I don't know if this is the same place or this is a different one, but in occupied Donetsk yesterday, says Tim White, a factory in the Petrovsky district was hit. Yeah, it sounds like it. That's the same district by a drone. The exact damage is not known. So there you go. That was mainly what happened yesterday. With just a bit more news on the Luch thermal power plant. Ukraine's latest strikes there in Belgorod's thermal power plant caused serious infrastructural damage, likely hitting 2 gas turbines at the site. The repeated targeting of Luch, a key energy hub, has disrupted electricity across the city. So that is in a spot of bother. Right, on to other bits and pieces. Now, with Russian oil below $40 a barrel, they have a serious problem, says Maria Drutska. 2025 budget originally expected $69.7 a barrel, then 56. Under 40 is a severe hit to finances, and the 2025 break-even estimate per barrel is $46 per barrel. So if anything is it's less than $46 a barrel, every barrel makes a loss. And one presumes at the moment they are making a loss on all of their oil exports. I'm not going to go through that one because I don't have time. Actually, let's be really super quick now. The Analyst, 2025 will end worse than it started. Ukraine is close to losing its west to east electricity supply system as Russia keeps cutting the grid through drone attacks. The western half of the country is supplied by Europe and domestic nuclear power stations. Few thermal power plants remain. Remember, Belasov just said 37% of hydroelectric power plants and more 70% of thermal have been taken off, I think, or damaged. The grid system carries power to the east, including Kyiv. And nobody knows how long it can last as it comes under intense pressure, placing millions of people in a distressed situation in the middle of winter. It's not just about light, but heat, water, and sewage, along with mobile connectivity. If the power goes out, it all goes out. Ukraine needs power. It needs aid, power generators and auxiliary systems on an unprecedented scale. And Ukraine is not alone in needing aid. Some 300 million people in Africa are in the midst of extreme conflict in Sudan, Congo, through war, and in Ethiopia, where rain has caused serious drought or lack of rain. Again, the aid agencies say they've seen foreign assistance cut by half, the biggest and most devastating loss being USAID, which now doesn't really exist at all. It made a profound difference, and with it all gone, so is the hope of millions. The one thing you never see from China or Russia is aid on that scale, if any. They are there to exploit opportunities caused by the chaos, not help anyone survive it. Americans were a generous nation. Their aid made a difference for what was a very low cost that gained them vast goodwill. In countries where eating every day is a struggle, seeing the USAID logo made you understand who really cared about you, a soft power that resonates deeply in people's lives. What has China or Russia ever done except exploit them? Now they have to allow that exploitation just to survive, and America has abandoned them. At the core of the world in decline, and more dangerous than it's ever been is Trump's America, the me nation, that's now only interested in feeding as much cash as it possibly can into the hands of a few at the top of the chain. And that includes the Trump clan. Not all Americans want it this way, but that's what the majority voted for. So there's a real sense that the world is in a very precarious place at the moment. The MI6 came out, Metro Welly from MI6 came out and talk to this idea as well, that there are shifting sands at the moment in terms of power. Then you can look at tech companies and the power being focused in so few people, not just corporations, but people like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, David Sacks, so on and so forth. Now, Russia is helping people smugglers flood Europe and the UK with migrants. I'm glad that the Daily Telegraph is headlining this, or is producing an article that talks to this. I interviewed Philip Abaji Jr. from Nigeria, who was talking about how this is a problem, that the Russians are facilitating this path through Libya and up into the Mediterranean, and trying to encourage Africans to go down those migration pathways to cause more political turmoil in Europe. It is a planned thing. And I think it's really important that that this is recognized by our media, particularly the ones who are very big on migration. As mentioned, Russian priests are back on a hill. Oh, did I mention that in a previous video? I just bumped into one of them in the house on the house side, says Katerina Lisunova. So today, representatives of the Russian Orthodox Church are once again on Capitol Hill, claiming to speak on a diverse faith coalition. They are pushing false allegations of religious persecution in Ukraine, echoing Kremlin narratives that have been used to justify Russia's war. It's despicable what they're doing, and yet there they are meeting with movers and shakers in the capital. These Russians rubbing shoulders with politicians. It's just, I think, despicable. Susie Wiles, all the explosive revelations of what she said, describes Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin as inconsistent rather than uniformly friendly. Although I have to say, I was most disturbed that she's got a signed picture from Donald Trump saying, "Susie, you're the greatest," and it's a picture of him and Vladimir Putin together on just around this point on the tarmac in Alaska. And I just found it really, really distasteful. And that shows you that he doesn't see democracies as wanted to rub shoulders with democratically elected leaders. He loves to see himself rub shoulders with dictators, but not in a way that, like, yeah, this is someone I'm going to get one over and show you how powerful the US is. This is like, I'm going to rub shoulders with this guy and we're going to be besties and we're going to make loads of money together. And I'm going to send you a picture of this encounter and sign that. It shows you how problematic having Trump and his team try and solve the war by working with Russia really is. Like, he doesn't see Putin as the bad guy. And Witkoff has said that himself, right? Recalling Trump's 2018 Helsinki summit with Putin, Susie Wiles said in that interview, from a distance, the interaction appeared to show genuine admiration or support or rapport. However, she said Trump's phone call with Putin during his second term have been mixed. Some are cordial, others are tense. South Africa confirms it's in talks with Russia to rescue 17 men allegedly tricked into military service and deployed to Ukraine. The country's presidency called their situation life-threatening. The previous president's daughter was involved in getting those men there, and now they're doing something to get them back, so that's good. Now, when Zelenskyy gave a speech in the Dutch parliament, he was met with a warm standing ovation, which is great. So it's really good to see that is still happening. I think that's really important, good reflection of things, certainly in Europe. Certain parts of Europe. Sweden's Navy has confirmed Russia is conducting a military operation in the Baltic Sea to protect its shadow fleet of oil tankers used to evade sanctions. The Russian naval ships now regularly patrol key sea lanes. Some tankers reportedly carry armed, uniformed personnel. And I referenced that yesterday. Friedrich Merz, a German chancellor, believes the probability of reaching an agreement in Europe on providing Ukraine with a reparation loan from frozen Russian assets is currently 50-50. According to him, the adoption of such a decision is necessary since Ukraine will need financing for at least 2 more years after the end of the current European aid package, which expires in the first quarter of 2026. And then the US is preparing new sanctions targeting Russia's energy trade, including its shadow fleet, if Putin refuses a peace agreement with the Ukraine. Yes, so Bloomberg reports this. I hope this is true. Measures could be announced as soon as this week, though the final decision rests with Trump. Now, the Congress are trying to pass something as well, a sanctions bill, which I don't know if that's the same thing, but anyway. And then Tim White says, this morning Putin's come out and made these speeches. The Kremlin must be in trouble because this lunchtime we're seeing a lot of propaganda and re-emphasis of how strong Russia is. First indicted war criminal Putin at a MOD conference says, quote, the goals of the SMO, the war, will be achieved without any conditions, in other words, concessions. He said, if the West refuses to talk, Russia will liberate historical lands by military means. So fact check, Russia refused all proposals or a ceasefire. Putin added, the claim that Russia poses a threat to Europe is a lie. A delusion. Fact check, he said the same about Ukraine in 2022. So go figure. Anyway, that's enough for me. Really appreciate your support. Sorry to rush it at the end. Please remember to check out atpgeo.com/donate, and you will come across our with Jonathan Fink of Silicon Curtain, our joint fundraiser for the 80th Air Assault Brigade, $12,398 into it. So we're looking at 16,000. Thank you very much for those who have already very kindly donated. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.